there's always tension for me between whether or not I actually want to be knitting like summer garments, but also at the same time, like how many wool pullovers does one woman truly need? Hi, hello, my name is Allie. I'm an independent graphic designer coming to you from just outside Toronto, and this is my channel where I talk about what I'm knitting, how it's going, and what it's costing me. Today we're going to be talking summer knitting plans and also a finished object to wrap up the spring knitting plans. But before we get into that, today I'm not drinking tea. Red alert. It's a weird day, but I figured since this is summer knitting plans, it seems to call for a cold beverage. And I'm not really a huge iced tea person. I don't currently have any tea that I would care to have in an iced form, nor do I tend to have the forethought to make a batch of iced tea. So today we're just drinking sparkling water, but I am drinking it out of the cutest cup, which is made by Heidi Burton, who went to OCAD with me. She's a really talented illustrator and has started doing some ceramics. And like I said, I'm currently wearing a finished object, so I'm not gonna tell you much about what I'm currently wearing the way I usually would at this exact moment, but we will get into it in a little bit. So to sort of lead us into the summer knitting plans, I feel like we need to go back and look at what were the spring knitting plans, how did those go, where are we relative to those? So the things that were on my spring knitting plans list were number one, the essential blanket from Unraveled. And this is one where I can't check it off as complete, but it also has been existing in the way that I intended for it to, which was as a background project, right? This is a kit for a blanket that is a very simple garter stitch, and I intended for it to be just like hey, when I don't have the capacity to be working on a more elaborate project, or if I want to do a little bit of knitting while reading in bed, that sort of thing. But I was aware when I started this that this was going to be probably on in the background for quite a long time, and that continues to be true. The blanket doesn't really look different from the last time that you saw it on the channel when it was like this big. So that's a project that I will update on now and then as I feel like I have updates, but I'm not really considering this one to be like an active whip that I'm going to be giving you updates on in every single video forevermore until it's done. The next thing on my spring knitting plans list was the Tucker by Alicia Plummer, which is in fact the finished object that I'm currently wearing. This is the one that my friend Lauren and I were doing kind of a buddy knit on together, working a fade between the same two colorways from Hedgehog Fibers. So if you've been following for a little bit, you've probably seen some of her updates on this as well. So after we go through our summer knitting plans, I'm going to give you a full finished object wrap up on my Tucker, and Lauren will be giving you one on hers too. But in the meantime, check, we did this one, complete. The next thing that was on my spring knitting plans list is kind of a funny one to discuss in this context because this was my serendipity by knitting for breakfast, and this one is actually a check, despite the fact that this may come as quite a surprise to you because you have seen, what have you seen? I think you saw the very beginning of this in my last episode. No, okay, so my last episode was the smaller podcast roundup. My previous episode before that, I had swatched for it, that's what it was. I showed you a swatch, and I don't even know how to express to you how unhinged a timeline on which that came together because it appears that stranded color work is absurdly addictive, at least to me, and it just started coming together so quickly that I was kind of like, at this point, I don't really want to film a project update of me being like 80% done. I would rather just finish this thing and then do an entire video that is just like start to finish my experience knitting my first stranded colorwork sweater. So I decided that's what I'm gonna do, so stay tuned. That's what my next video is going to be. But in the meantime, check on this one too, and that one feels really good because I've had some of that yarn sitting in my stash since I picked it up in Vancouver last October, which for me feels like quite a long time to have yarn in the stash. And I'm really excited that it's now fulfilling its life's purpose in my sweater. Now the fourth item on my spring knitting plans list was the Allgood Tee by Magdalena Parker. And did this one happen? Are you good? Are you okay? Come here. Copper's just kind of sitting by my stool making vague, like, coffee barfy noises. Hi. Anyway, so that was in the plans. This, we did not even get close to this. And I knew at the time that I was making these plans that one was the sort of like stretch goal. I figured like best case scenario, I might cast this one on, but probably wouldn't get so far as finishing it. And yeah, I did not even get so far as casting this on. Actually, I didn't even get as far as acquiring yarn for this one. So this one is a complete 0x, did not do. So yeah, that's how the spring knitting plans went because yeah, I didn't add anything that wasn't on the list either. I stayed on task. So that's it. That's the summation of the spring knitting plan. So where does that leave me? What am I knitting this summer? So in putting together my summer knitting plans, there were a few kind of guiding thoughts that were like circulating in my head as I was trying to figure out which kind of things I would like to make. And I feel like there's always kind of this tension for me when I'm knitting in the warmer weather months between whether or not I actually want to be knitting like summer garments. Like, do I want to be tying my knitting to the seasons or not? Because like at the end of the day, I could just knit like thick wool pullovers all year round and be so happy. Like those are the things that I tend to favorite the quickest, that tend to really just like get their hooks in me and really entice me to knit them. But also at the same time, like how many wool pullovers does one woman truly need? Like I think we've already vastly exceeded any sort of realm of need. Of course, now we're strictly into which ones I want to knit. But I feel like there is a certain practicality to try to spend some time knitting some things that might be versatile in other ways in other seasons, right? I live in Ontario where the weather varies radically throughout the year, right? Like we can be going from plus 35 degrees Celsius in the summer to negative 35 degrees Celsius in the winter. Granted, that's like a particularly bad day. That's extremely cold, but it's a really big range. And if I'm only ever knitting for half the range, it's like, well, it kind of feels like a missed opportunity. So I'm always kind of torn between just knit the things that are already in your favorites that you were already excited to knit, and like, maybe you should go look at if there are things that are more warm weather knits that do appeal to you and that you are excited about. But then there's also the fact that undeniably I get more wear out of my sweaters than I do out of the warm weather garments that I've knit so far. But then again, the more cold weather garments I knit, the less use I will get out of each of those individually either, because one can simply only wear one sweater at a time. So if I have 365 sweaters, they only get worn once a year, and that's if I could wear one every single day, right? So like, I think that I have now been knitting long enough that logic of like how much something will get worn based on time of year kind of starts to fall apart, because I definitely now have more sweaters than I would have if I weren't having them because I was making them. Like if I were just trying to curate a wardrobe via shopping, I would have stopped buying sweaters by now. Like I just simply don't need more sweaters. And that's not to say I won't be knitting more sweaters, because I absolutely will, because I love to knit sweaters. But I do think that it is worth exploring other options, and I don't think that them getting less wear because a knit tank top is not always practical doesn't actually make it less practical than adding yet another wool sweater to my wardrobe. And another thing I've been thinking about lately is that I'm kind of feeling an itch to knit something that is not just a standard pullover, which is funny because at the start of this year I was like, I just want to make myself some pullovers, because last year I realized, I went back and looked at my projects, I actually didn't knit one single like pullover sweater for myself, because last year I spent a ton of the year knitting my giant no frills cardigan, which no regrets, I'm obsessed with that. I knit a few summer tops, I knit some Christmas stockings, I knit my sister's cardigan. So like a lot of the time that I spent on kind of like knitting cold weather sweatery things went to either my giant cardigan or my sister's cardigan, and just none of those were pullovers. And so at the start of this year I was like, I want new sweaters, I want to knit sweaters. And now it is the very end of May as I'm recording this, and I have knit 3.5 sweaters this year, depending on whether you count this one. But because I have already knit my Lyon, I knit my Colette, I knit my Serendipity, which you'll see in my next video, and I've knit this. Like I've knit nothing but pullovers, and so I'm kind of like ready for a change of pace. And so in putting together my summer knitting plans, I was sort of trying to think of what that should be, and I realized that if I am really being honest, I think that a hole in my wardrobe currently, and actually a thing that prevents me from getting more wear out of my more warm weather knits currently, is that I don't currently really have a lot of options as far as layering pieces, aka in this case cardigans. And I think that part of this is because I have struggled to find a style of cardigan that feels right to me. Here's the problem. I used to wear a lot of cardigans, particularly like in high school. I was a big cardigan girl. And do you know what I'm talking about if I say to you the feeling of like cosplaying as your former self? Like just over time, my personal style has shifted and evolved. And there's just something about a lot of cardigans that now make me feel like I don't want to wear them, because they don't feel like me anymore. They feel like a previous me, and it's just a very strange like dissonance that I put them on and I'm like, it looks wrong, I don't like it. And I think that makes sense, but I think that it's also created some logistical difficulties in my wardrobe, because I don't think I have really succeeded in finding a replacement for it in a lot of contexts. Like sometimes I can make up for that with a jacket, whether it's like a denim jacket or a leather jacket or whatever, and I feel very comfortable making up for it in contexts where a jacket is involved. But the rest of the time I feel a little bit more like, well, if I'm gonna need a sweater, I'm just gonna wear like a pullover sweater. But it does take away some of the flexibility, right? Like a cardigan really does give you more options. It's easier to adjust your layering throughout the day. And I do feel like there are some things in my closet that I often would like to wear, but then I go, oh, but I might get cold though. And the thought process kind of ends there because I don't currently have anything that I like how it goes with. And that seems like a really silly limitation, and one that I could probably solve with knitting, which would in turn solve my problem of wanting to knit something that's not a pullover. And so I've been thinking about this idea of needing to knit some cardigans, but kind of struggling, like I said, to find ones that don't feel like they're plucked from the closet of like 16-year-old me. So that was sort of a guiding principle in my search for summer patterns. And another part of this feeling like I want to knit something that's a little bit different is that as much as of course each sweater looks different from another sweater that I've knit, there's a degree to which, like, just in terms of the look itself that I am styling out of these sweaters, they're all kind of fundamentally the same look. Like, I'm still kind of creating the same silhouette. It's still fundamentally the same overall outfit. And I think I'm kind of interested in trying to knit some things that will just create a different kind of outfit. Just give me more different options of the kinds of looks that I can style using my knits. So I think to me, like, that could also mean still knitting a pullover, but knitting one that is in a noticeably different silhouette than usual. Like, for me, maybe that would be something cropped, because I tend to lean away from knitting cropped things because I feel very aware of how those sort of come and go in style. And I have been coming at my knits from a place of wanting to feel like they have a lot of longevity and that they will kind of be in my wardrobe forevermore. But kind of the more things that I knit, and again, the bigger my knitted wardrobe becomes, the more I'm kind of like, is it the worst thing if one of these kind of goes into a box for 5 years before it comes out again? Like, you probably have enough other ones, it's probably fine. So I think that I'm starting to feel a little bit more willingness to take some more risks in the kinds of patterns and like silhouettes that I'm knitting. But I don't want to kind of end up feeling like I'm in like a fast fashion-y cycle with my knitting. I think that's something that I'm trying to be cognizant of. So there's a bit of a fine line, I think, that I'm trying to figure out how to tread now that I'm like, but like, do you need another staple, classic, timeless, whatever, you know what I'm saying? So yeah, these are kind of things that I've been thinking about in the context of putting together my summer knitting plans. So in terms of what they actually are, all right, so summer knitting plans. So when I was first kind of thinking about if I were to knit something that truly was a summery kind of garment, what would I like that to be? Something that I noticed catching my eye were things that were sort of ruffly. And usually to appeal to me, a ruffle needs to be sort of a larger ruffle, like a kind of big, like, statement ruffle. Like, I absolutely love the look of the Souffle by Laura Penrose on other people, but it's simply too frilly for me. Like, it also for me harkens back to like a past me that just feels weird and off to me to wear now. But I do still really appreciate like a graphic ruffle, if you get me. So in this category, I found a few sort of honorable mentions that I would like to shout out before I show you the one that I'm actually planning to knit. So the first one is the Sea Breeze top by Brianna Lupino, which is so cute. I love the fitted bodice paired with these really huge ruffle sleeves. I feel like it's so fun. The only reason that this one is not making it onto my to knit list is because part of what I love about it is that it really reminds me of a different top I already have. And that top is made out of linen, so it's kind of different in that way, but like structurally, like, tell me this isn't the same shirt. Like, it's just too similar. I would find myself kind of, I think, splitting my attention between the two when I just feel like it's the day to wear that kind of top. And I don't feel like I need to split that attention. Like, I feel like I already kind of crave more opportunities to wear my linen one than I actually have. So I would just like to continue letting it shine when I have an opportunity to wear that kind of top. So it's not the year for the Sea Breeze, but I do think someone should make it. Another one that I really love the look of is the Pottery Slipover by Knittail, but this one I struggle with because it's designed to be a slipover. So it has this sort of like loose drapey look, and I don't know how to wear a slipover. Like, I just don't think that like fits into my style. Like, anytime I see them, I'm like, that's cute, but not me. So I don't think it would work for me in that capacity. And I also think I would find it hard to wear this as a tank top because it's so sort of loose and drapey. Like, I feel like I would really need to wear it with like a bandeau, like it's 2011, and I just don't feel like I want to do that. And if I were to modify it so that I didn't feel like I needed to do that, then it would just look like a very different top that I'm not sure is one I would like. So this is one I really, really love in theory, but again, I think it's just not my style, but again, I think someone should knit it because I think it's really cute. And then the last honorable mention here is the Juno top by Veronika, which, okay, this is not like a ruffle top, but I think you can see there's sort of like a spiritual connection here amongst these things, right? Like it shares some similarities in terms of just like the category of top. It's a cute, girly summer top, right? And now this one I might still make at some point. There are a lot of options in this pattern in terms of whether you want it like off the shoulder or strapless or with straps, or do you want the little decorative edge or not. And so if I were to do this, it would definitely be this version with the off the shoulder and the little decorative edge. However, the decorative edge is actually crocheted. So that would be what forces me to learn anything about crochet, because so far the extent of my knowledge of crochet is how to use a crochet hook to pick up a drop stitch. So that would definitely be like a whole new realm for me. I don't really see myself getting into crochet as a whole, but maybe as like a little here and there, like addition to something, just opening up the idea of a scalloped edge, because I do like a good scalloped edge. Opening up that option might be good. This one's a maybe for the future. Maybe this will make it onto next year's summer knitting plans, but it's not this year's, because what is actually making it onto my summer knitting list this year is the Ardent top. And unfortunately for me, this happened to me last summer. It is part of an issue of Pom Pom magazine, which means that I get to purchase an entire magazine yet again for one pattern. We love that for us. So this pattern is by Kindred Red. It's a sport weight pattern designed to accommodate up to between a 60 to a 62 inch bust, just depending on how much of the recommended positive ease that you want. And because you have to buy the whole magazine, it costs 11 Great British pounds or 21 Canadian dollars. $21. Yeah. And as I learned last year when this happened to me to knit my cloud bow, it's paying more money for what's definitely going to be a worse pattern, just because of the nature of space in printed magazines. Patterns tend to be a lot more sparse and leave you to figure out a lot more on your own. So here's to hoping that there's something else in that magazine I decide to knit at some point, so it's like slightly more worth my while. I haven't looked yet to see what else is in there. I just have sort of like accepted that this is my fate, because I look at this top. Look, I love the color blocking on the front so much. I'm actually kind of undecided if I'm going to knit it as is with the stripes on the back. I've already decided I don't want to integrate a third color, so I'm not going to do that little semicircle at the bottom. But I'm debating. I love what the front is doing so much that I kind of just want to repeat that on the back, because if someone's seeing it from the back, they're not seeing it at the front, and I don't want them to miss how cute that looks, right? So I think I might make that modification. But I really love the combination of this super like geometric, bold color blocking with the ruffle. That juxtaposition just makes me really happy. I also love the juxtaposition in the colors they've used here, where the base is this really natural neutral color and then it's paired with this really, really bright color. I love that neon and neutrals kind of idea. That La Bien-Aimée book, Neons and Neutrals, really appeals to me just aesthetically, even though I don't think any of the patterns are quite things I want to knit, so I'm probably not going to buy it. I just like looking at it. Part of the catch with this one is that, like I said, it's a sport weight. It's sampled in the Kelbourne Woolens Mojave, which is a fun like plant fiber mix, makes it very appropriate for summer. And I was trying to find good alternatives to this, because it seems to be kind of hard to source here, and even within the States, not a lot of places have all of the colors left. I'm not sure if it's like on its way out and not being restocked, or if it's just like kind of stocked intermittently or what's going on, but like even the Kelbourne Woolens website only has some of the colors in stock, and I think it didn't have the neutral color in stock when I was looking. And so it is this kind of specific natural fibers blend. I didn't want to veer too far from that, because I do think that the drape, especially of the ruffle, is really important, and when you start messing with fiber content, you start messing with the drape of it, and your project might turn out looking a lot different from the sample photos. And when I went looking in Ravelry, a lot of people who have knit this knit it out of the Kelbourne Woolens Mojave, so I was like, I don't feel like I have a lot to go off of in terms of alternate options, especially in a sport weight. It's hard enough to find sport weight in like wool, let alone this particular plant fiber combo. So I decided to just like minimize issues, and I love the color combo from this sample so much. Then like, let's just get that. So I was kind of hunting, trying to figure out where I could get this from that would also cost me the least amount of an arm and a leg in terms of shipping, because nowhere that I could find, not one single shop in Canada that I could find, had both colors in stock, or even one that had one and then one that had the other in stock that I could kind of then pool together. It's very hard to find here. So I kind of had accepted that I was looking at the States and I'm going to be dealing with duty. Blech. But I was still having a hard time finding both the colors in the same place, and it was finally my friend Lauren, who you'll see a little bit later, who was like, oh, my local yarn shop, the Tea Cozy here in Seattle, actually has it in stock in a lot of colors if you want to order it from there. So that's what I ended up doing. Thank you to the Tea Cozy. So I picked up 3 skeins of the natural color and 3 skeins of the bright yellow color, which cost me $119.16 in Canadian dollars. 27 of that was shipping, and that converts out to about $87 US. Rather expensive pattern in this case, and the yarn. We're currently looking at a total project cost of about $140 Canadian or about $100 US. So we'll also see if that number changes as the yarn makes its way to me, and perhaps a cruise duty, probably a cruise duty. So stay tuned for that number to get worse. And in terms of construction, this pattern is knit flat because it uses intarsia. So it's been quite a while since I've done a fully seamed garment, though I suspect that the ruffle is like picked up and knit in the round at least. And I'm not stoked about that, but at the very least, like, the armhole's pretty big and the body's pretty small, so I don't think there's going to be like a ton of seaming. I might still regret this decision later, TBD. But it's so cute that I'm feeling motivated to power through on this one. Another thing I'd really like to knit this summer is another Sailor Swift top by Veronika Lindberg. And this is like, sound the alarms, because I don't think I have ever knit the same pattern twice. That's not true. I did knit a couple pairs of grizzly socks, but I feel like a sock pattern is a little bit different. And both of those I was giving away. So this is the first time I'm even considering knitting the same garment again for myself, but I'm also not, because I would like to make some pretty significant modifications to this one. I'm more just using it as like a jumping off point, because I realized I quite like the look of this sort of high neck tank top. And I've particularly been coveting one that Hannah Louise Poston, who's one of my favorite YouTubers, she has been wearing quite a lot lately. She has this tank top from Quince, sort of in this style, but it has this like really thick edging that's kind of uncommon in the style of tank. And I have dreams of emulating this in a knit version, but where hers has the really thick edging. In mine, in the knitting context, it would be either double knit or like folded knit edging. I haven't decided yet which would work best, but doing that instead of doing the I-cord edging. I just, like, maybe I will realize there are issues with this when I actually attempt this, but I just have visions of it being so like polished and luxe. Like, just the idea of the like $100 t-shirt version of this tank top. And I really like my Sailor Swift from last summer, but it definitely has things about it that are not ideal. Like, the I-cord definitely did make the armholes much smaller than I was expecting them to be, and tighter than is the ideal amount of comfortable. Like, I definitely still wear it. I still like that top. It's just, it could be better in that way. And there's also the fact that I knit it out of the Knitting for Olive Pure Silk, which I do really love as a fiber choice in terms of like how it functions as a summer garment. But this pattern kind of says like you can knit it anywhere from a fingering weight to a DK, depending on how sort of drapey or sturdy you want the fabric to be. And I just kind of realized, oh yeah, like, you're too tight of a knitter to be like stretching yarn to a gauge that's like thicker than it is. So mine just kind of feels, because silk doesn't bloom really, it just feels a little bit more open than I would ideally like for it to be. I would just love for it to look a little bit more dense and plump. So I kind of have visions of creating a new version that is more like that, but that is really not replacing that one at all. Like, I still intend to wear that one and get lots of wear out of it over time, but I do think I would also really enjoy a version that has a very different feeling fabric, and also that is not striped, which I feel like is a key detail that will kind of help these two exist as very separate pieces in my wardrobe, because I feel quite strongly that for 90% of people, when you really like something and so then you decide to get a second version of it, that's almost always a mistake. Usually one was the correct amount, and we end up using the second one a lot less than the first one, and we are always like, why? I love the first one so much. Why do I not wear this one? It's the same thing, just in a different color. And it's like, because you picked the one you wanted the first time, and you will just always like this one less. Like, this is just like a small little molehill that I occasionally want to die on. So I feel like all of these changes in terms of like the gauge and the different edges and making it not striped, these will all kind of amount to it feeling like just a very different garment. Like, they both just happen to be tank tops, but that's kind of about it as far as their similarities go. So I really would like to knit that. TBD what it's knit out of, or exactly what color it is. This one's still sort of up in the air, but I would like to do it. So to quickly run through the pattern stats, this is the Sailor Swift by Veronika Lindberg. This one is worked up in anywhere from a fingering to a DK weight. The pattern costs $5.90 in euros, or about $10 Canadian, and it accommodates up to a 59.5 inch bust. One of the yarn possibilities that I'm considering for this one is using some of my Cascade 220 that was originally purchased for my squiggle sweater. And then I got it and realized that this navy that I'd ordered was such a like garishly royal blue compared to the navy that I was envisioning, that beside the red of the squiggles, that I was like, this looks too clowny. Like, this is not at all the vibe I pictured. So I ended up having to purchase an entirely different navy yarn for that project. And then was just kind of stuck with this because I'd ordered it as like a custom order for my yarn shop. So I couldn't really return it. I was just stuck with it. And it's also an awkward amount. It's like, it's not really a sweater quantity for me because it was purchased to be paired with this red color, but it's like certain patterns that are designed to have a more like fitted look and that are a little on the shorter side. Like I could maybe just squeak them out with it, but it's not a comfortable sweater quantity. So I've sort of been debating, like, do I try using some of that for this tank top? It is technically a worsted weight, but like I knit tight, so I really think that like if I just worked on the recommended needle size with this yarn, it would be like most people knitting with a DK weight, which would be to pattern. So I've kind of been considering that. I think it would be a really nice color for that. I'm just a little wary of like, do I want to orphan the remaining skeins after that? Because it's kind of an awkward quantity now, but at least it's a bigger awkward quantity, which gives you more options. And if I use up half of it or whatever to make a tank top, then I just have an even more awkward amount left. So I'm not sure. Between it potentially being off gauge and that, I'm like, this might be a bad idea. Maybe I'll just go buy new yarn. TBD, but that is a thought that's like floating around in my head. Now, something else I would really like to knit this summer is the Allgood Tee. I still really want to make this. I still think it's really cute. I have some concerns about whether this one will actually happen this year because do I want to knit more plain stockinette right now? I feel like I knit a lot of cables this winter and was like, I need a break. To Stockinette Island I go. And then I went there and I think I maybe spent too long there, or like just long enough, and now I'm ready to be leaving. So I don't know if I want to go back just yet. And this is a lot of stockinette. It's a fingering weight t-shirt, but the sleeves are quite big, quite long. Like, it's not really going to be a whole lot different than knitting a sweater. That's just a lot of stockinette. And I'm just not sure if I'm going to be up to that this summer. I would love to be. We will find out. But so this is the Allgood Tee from Magdalena Parker. Pattern costs $9 US and accommodates up to a 59-inch bust. It's a drop shoulder construction knit in the round. And I'm thinking this is one that I will probably knit out of Sameness Garn Sunday. I think that when I looked at all the project photos, the ones that I really liked the look of were the ones that were knit in merino, which pros and cons to using that as a summer fiber for sure, but what I love so much about this design is that really structural quality to it, and I think you really lose a lot of that when you go for a plant-based fiber, because it tends to have a lot more drape to it. It's heavier. So I'm thinking Sameness Garn Sunday. I need to go to the knitting loft and just look at colors in person, because I think this is one where I want it to be some like bright fun color. I'm just not quite sure which one yet, so I'd like to be able to go suss that out in person and kind of really see the like details of the exact hues in person, because I am nothing if not picky and would like to know that I'm picking the right one. I feel like in a garment this kind of clean and streamlined, the color is really going to be the star of the show, so I would like it to be the right one. And my final and definitely my most concrete summer knitting plan, because I've actually already started this one, I'll show you that in a second, is what I'm calling my Saki cardigan. I'm knitting a cardigan, a thick wool cardigan, which, I mean, is this classic summer knitting plans? No, but in my defense, and I will also say in defense of aka Nora Knits, because I love Nora's videos. I featured her channel in my original roundup of my favorite knitting podcasts, but she recently put out a video kind of in the spirit of like seasonal pattern roundups, and her concept was summer sweaters. And I thought this was a fantastic idea. I love the idea of a sweater that's designed to be thrown on like at the end of a hot day as it starts to cool down. This might be a sweater that involves a lot of lace work, so it's a little bit open, or maybe it's one that's made out of cotton or something else. And I thought this was a great idea. Apparently she got some flack in the comments for that video. I think it's genius. And in that spirit, I'm knitting a summer sweater, okay? not even as well thought out a summer sweater as Nora was talking about, because like I said, she was talking about like textures that make sense in the summer, fabrics that make sense in the summer. I'm not doing that. I just think that sometimes I still wear cardigans in the summer. And if I'm gonna knit a heavy wool sweater in the summer, it makes more sense for it to be a cardigan than a pullover. Listen, if I'm sitting around a summer bonfire, I'm probably gonna have a cardigan on, and I intend to knit the perfect cardigan to do that in. So also related to Nora, this is all very full circle. A million years ago, Nora started knitting a giant long cardigan out of Nora Madara in the colorway Saki. And, you know, like I think most people in the world, thought that it was a stunning yarn. This is not a unique take. I'm not probably telling you anything you don't already know, but it's a beautiful yarn. I love the way that from a distance it looks like a complete neutral, and then the closer up you get, the more colorful it gets. I think that's really fun. And also just it's a way of kind of making fun colors a little bit more practical in your wardrobe in terms of playing with other things that you might be wearing. And after seeing it featured on her channel many times, right as she's working on, she was knitting like a giant cardigan out of it. So this project went on for a long time, and it sort of grew in my esteem the more times that I saw it. But by the time I got to the idea of like, yeah, I really want to knit something out of that, it was really hard to find. Like I couldn't find it in stock anywhere. I'd sort of progressed to the stage of acceptance of like, I just will not be able to have this yarn. It is not to be. Again, Nora, this all comes back to Nora, posted one day on her Instagram story like, hey, this little online yarn shop happens to have a bunch of Nora Madara Saki in stock. If you are one of the people who's been clamoring to get your hands on this yarn since I've been talking about it on the channel. And I was like, me, hi, hello, hi, yes, purchase. And this was also like very indicative of how much I wanted to knit with this specific yarn, because I knew that I was kind of a couple of things in my queue away from being able to knit with this. And I generally don't like to be purchasing yarn for projects too far out. Like I want to always be leaving room to like change my mind about what I want to knit next, because knits aren't quick. So if I'm purchasing things like 3-4 knits out, who's to say that 5 months from now there's not something else I'd rather be knitting, right? But this time I was like, no, we're going for it. We're getting this yarn right now. And get this yarn, we did. So I picked up 7 skeins of this, and at the time I wasn't sure exactly which pattern I was planning to knit with it, but I knew that I wanted to knit like a big cozy cardigan out of it. So I picked up 7 skeins to be on the safe side. Now I ordered this from the online shop Scout and Skein, and let's see, what was the damage here? So this was in Canadian dollars, $293.11, which, here's the thing. That's just a start. We're off to a bad start. Then, because, so this little shop, the only place that I could find to get it, I believe they didn't ship to Canada. If I'm wrong about that, there was some other weird reason why I couldn't get them to ship it to me, but I couldn't get them to ship it to me directly, which means I had to use a reshipping service, which is, you know, a fun and not at all terribly expensive option that is available to us Canadians when, you know, larger countries forget that we exist sometimes. So fortunately, at least, I was purchasing enough yarn that it was free shipping within the US, so it was shipped for free to the reshipper, and then I paid $32.50 Canadian to have it shipped on to me. So fun, but that's still not the end, because alas, I feel in the last few months, I used to sometimes get hit with duty on packages coming from other countries. Now I get it like every single time. So that duty ran me $47.76. Thank God this came via Canada Post, because if you incur duties, Canada Post doesn't charge you for like handling the package through that process. You're just paying the actual like government taxes. So like, okay, we live in a society, fine. If this had come via like UPS or FedEx, who add on their brokerage fees that tend to be more than the duties themselves, like I don't even want to think about what that would have been. So thankfully this came via Canada Post, which brings our grand total for the materials for this cardigan to, drum roll please, $373.37, which is a fun kind of numerical sequence, not a fun price tag. In terms of the US cost, that actually converts out to about $270 US, but if I were in the US and were knitting this as an American knitter, it actually would have only cost me $203 US, because that was the yarn cost. Shipping would have been free and there would have been no duties and whatever. So that's all the painful data on this. Let's get into the fun part. So what am I doing with this? So for this Saki cardigan project, as I'm gonna call it, I started looking for cardigan patterns, and again, trying to find ones that did not feel like cosplaying my former self, trying to find something that really felt like a contemporary silhouette that was different than something I would have worn then, and that feels like something that appeals to me and fits into my style now. So the first thing that I thought I landed on in this hunt was the Field Day jacket by Ozetta. I thought that would be really pretty in the Saki yarn. I like the length of it. It's very different than the length of something that 16-year-old me would have worn, but it's not so long that it's like my no-frills cardigan, because I love that piece. It's iconic. I wear it all the time at home. I wear it sometimes out as a perfect like statement outfit piece, but it does have certain impracticalities. Obviously, there's a lot of contexts where it's just kind of a liability, something I have to try to make sure I'm keeping off the ground or that I don't trip over. Like, it's just simply not always practical. So I would like to have a cardigan that's like a little bit more utilitarian, and I felt like this fit that bill pretty nicely. I do believe that the gauge was slightly off what I expected to be working with my sake, so I thought I might have to make some adjustments there, but I was confident that I would be able to make it work with a little bit of tweaking. Then, as I was getting into the later stages on my serendipity with the idea that I was gonna start this cardigan next, wouldn't you know that Ozetta happens to release the Lakes cardigan, which is sampled in Noromadara sake. And isn't that so lovely of her to show me what this cardigan would look like in exactly the yarn that I'm hoping to knit it out of. There are a lot of similarities between these two, especially since the lengths are shown as different, but I do think that I might end up knitting my Lakes cardigan longer depending on the amount of yarn that I have, what it permits me to do, but maybe ending up a little bit more similar to the field day jacket. And I decided that I just really love that saddle shoulder detail. I feel like it just gives it a little bit more polish than the field day jacket has. I think that the field day jacket might have run the risk of just kind of feeling like something I just put on at home when I need something, but that I wouldn't necessarily build an outfit around. Whereas I feel like the Lakes cardigan is something that I really could build an outfit around and feel like, wow, like I put together a cute outfit to go out into the world today. So I think that the Lakes cardigan is a little bit of a better fit that way. So let's run through the project stats. So this is the Lakes cardigan, like I said, from Ozetta. This is a worsted weight pattern designed to be knit up on 5.5mm needles, and it accommodates up to a 60-inch bust. It costs $650 US, which puts our full project grand total between the yarn and all its associated fees and the pattern at $385 Canadian dollars. Gross. Or if you were in the US doing all this without all those extra fees, it would only be $210 US. It is a saddle shoulder construction cardigan knit flat, and I'm planning to knit the size small. Now, that said, does that mean it's a perfect fit and I'm gonna make this with absolutely no modifications? Of course not. I have to tinker with things. That would make it too easy. So first of all, I'm not planning to hold this with mohair because you heard those numbers. Are you kidding me? Like, this is already almost a $400 sweater for me. I am not adding mohair to this, nor do I feel like I need to. I feel like this yarn is so beautiful. I do not feel like it needs anything added to it. The one thing is that, is that going to affect the gauge? I wondered and thought like, okay, I might need to do a little bit of adjusting to accommodate for that. But spoiler, turns out no, my gauge turned out perfectly fine. And also, perfectly fine using the recommended needles, which famously tight knitter, never using the recommended needles, so that I'm at gauge on the recommended needles without mohair. You really don't need mohair for this pattern. I mean, as I started working with the yarn, I do kind of see how, okay, there are some like thicks and thins, and I see how mohair could kind of help smooth that out, but I also feel like the density of the gauge is dense enough that I don't see those thicks and thins in the fabric. So I think that this is what, if you want to knit this, but the mohair thing has you hesitating, I don't think you need it at all. And then, like I said, I do think I'll probably knit it longer. I think it calls for 1,100 yards in the size that I would be knitting, and I actually have between my 7 skeins, I think I have about 1,500 yards. So that will get me some extra length. The way also, another modification I plan to make is that I think I want to do a double knit button band rather than doing it ribbed as shown. So that will use some extra yarn also, but I have plenty of extra, or at least should. So between lengthening it and the double knit button band, I plan to make good use of this yardage. And I'm also debating, do I put buttons on this? And I will admit to you, part of asking this question is a fear. I don't like when a cardigan is done up and you can see the button band kind of doing this, where it's being like pulled by the buttons. And like sometimes you'll see someone's project photos from something where they somehow the button band is perfectly straight when it's done up, and it's like everything, nothing is pulling anywhere. And I just simply don't know how that's achieved. And so I don't feel like it's likely that I will achieve it, and that therefore I will regret putting buttons on mine. So if you have tips for how to do that like perfect button band where it's done up and sits in a perfectly straight line as if there's not even a button clasping through a hole from separate sides of a garment at all, please let me know. And if I feel like I have a good understanding of how to do that, maybe I will attempt it. But currently I'm a little bit hesitant, and also just like, I'm just not a big like buttoned up cardigan person. Like I would probably just have it open 99% of the time, and then it's like, why did I go to the trouble of making buttonholes? But are the buttons just a cute accessory on the one side? Should I just attach buttons and not make buttonholes? So many questions. Also, when I was thinking about doing this double knit button band, this was before I had purchased the pattern. So I was kind of looking at it, and it's, you know, it's not clear until you have the pattern exactly how the construction works. And so I was like, will I have to like ignore part of the pattern? Is it gonna have me start with ribbing either on a saddle or at the back of the neck? Like, am I gonna have to ignore that step? pick up and come back and do it later. Is the button band knit simultaneously to the body? Am I gonna have to adjust the stitch count to not be doing that? And also, how am I gonna manage my yardage? Because it's hard to just knit as much length as my yardage allows without potentially then running out of yardage and working on my button band if I'm having to do it after the fact, because it's a double knit button band, so I can't knit it simultaneously. So then I was like, okay, well, maybe what I need to do is plan to actually, instead of doing a picked up button band, doing a sewn on button band, which I realized was an option. That way I could kind of be knitting it separately, concurrently with the sweater. So like as the sweater gets longer, I'm making this button band longer, so I kind of always know that I have enough button band for the length of cardigan that I'm currently knitting, if that makes sense, and then just attach it when I'm done. But then the Angel, who is Hip Knit Hooray, did a whole project vlog video. She was a test knitter, so she knows all about this project. She's already done the whole thing. And via that, before actually purchasing the pattern, I was able to learn that the button band is knit afterward anyway, so I wasn't going to need to like ignore any button band instructions or figure out how to omit that while I'm knitting the pattern. So that was good to know. So when I was starting this project, I was a good little knitter and I made my swatch. And then I realized how very foolish that was. Not only because I should have been able to figure this out myself, but also because it was already told to me like 2 weeks ago by Hip Knit Hooray, and I'd simply forgotten that you don't actually need to swatch for this, because the very first thing that the project has you cast on is a saddle, which is a swatch. Functionally, it's like almost exactly the size of a standard swatch, and then just a little bit longer. But so if you just start your saddle, you can use that to check your gauge. And then if it's right, you just keep knitting a little bit more and then your saddle is done. So that would have been a smarter thing to do than what I did. Instead, I knit a normal swatch, which unfortunately will not function as a saddle of my garment, but that's fine. And like I said, I did hit gauge without the mohair and without having to adjust my needle size at all. And the swatch was a fun time because I realized that one of my 5.5 millimeter needles is missing, along with one of my 6 millimeter needles. So I clearly was using one as my right needle and one as my left needle on something, which I have absolutely scoured my house for and have found nowhere. And I had known for a while that they were not in my case, but I kind of figured, well, they'll turn up, and also it's not urgent because I have learned that really the only needle size that matters is the one in your right hand, and the one in your left hand can be smaller, and your stitches will still end up the right size. And that is true as long as you're knitting in the round. And guess what's not knit in the round? 99% of cardigans. So in doing my swatch, I was like, oh, I don't have the needles to do this. So for the first few rows, I decided to inflict on myself a fun, newfangled method of torture, which is that on every single row, I was swapping the two tips of my needles. Like I was using a smaller one on the left, but then every time I hit the end of the row, I had to swap them so that I could purl back across and still be using the same size needle. It was horrible. And then I realized, wait a minute, I think I have a set of 5.5 millimeter wooden needles that I got for travel on a project. So then I got those out, which made it much quicker. I didn't have to do the annoying swap anymore. However, here's the thing. When I was knitting on the metal needles, it was super annoying every time I got to the end of the row. When I switched it to the wooden needles, it was just pretty annoying the whole time because I have reached a point where I just hate wooden needles. Like I have thus far only used them in the context of travel when I knew that I was going somewhere where they would confiscate my metal needles. So it was always kind of like, well, it's so much better to be knitting on these wooden needles than to not be knitting at all, because that's my other option, right? So I would so much rather be knitting, and that would kind of take a lot of the focus off of the less desirable qualities of wooden needles to me. And something about now sitting there in my own living room knitting on wooden needles was simply too much. I was like, this is horrific. I can't, the scraping feeling, I just hate it. So that was what prompted me to order replacement needles for my 5.5 and my 6, which undoubtedly means that the originals will show up any day now. But I did at least find an Etsy shop that's in Canada, so shipping wasn't terrible. I didn't have to worry about duties, where I could buy like individual sizes of these Lucas Cypra tips for like $10 a piece. So I was like, for $10, this is so worth it to me to not spend this entire cardigan hating my life. So that's what I did. I ordered a new pair of 5.5 millimeters and a new pair of 6 while I was at it. So they just arrived the other day. finally have the needles to appropriately knit this on. But it does mean that I got started on this project on my wooden needles. And let me show you how much I suffered through with these wooden needles. So this is the beginning of my Lakes cardigan. So the way that you start this one, like I said, is with the saddles. So you knit one saddle for each shoulder, and I knit these up 2 at a time because just once I learned how to knit 2 at a time, I can't not knit anything 2 at a time. And then you pick up a bunch of stitches, and then you start working the back and shaping it using German short rows. So I did have to relook up how to do German short rows. But just look how pretty this fabric is. Like, all of the little flecks of color, it's just so pretty. I just really love how this looks. It is deeply expensive yarn, as we've established, but it's so beautiful. And it also, I just feel like it's so well dispersed. Like, you don't get any weird pooling things. Like, it really just looks like magical little hoarder elves that have just been like collecting little bits and pieces of things, just spent like 1 million hours making you the perfect little yarn of all their findings. And I just love it. Of course, this is not how it's actually worn. It will actually look more like this. Yeah, it's over there. So I have just started shaping some increases on the back, which are going to be part of like the underarm. So the back is currently getting wider from here. It is currently still on my wooden needles, which I cannot stand. And I'm so excited to get these on my new ones. I just actually haven't knit for the last couple days. So the next time I pick this up, I'm absolutely shifting this over to my metal needles because I cannot wait. But that is the current status of the Lakes cardigan. All right, so that's it as far as what I'm thinking for summer knitting plans, which means it's time to circle back to wrap up my spring knitting plans, which is the Tucker by Alicia Plummer. One last recap on these project stats. This is a fingering weight knit that's designed to accommodate up to between a 72 to a 74 inch bust, just depending on how much of the recommended positive ease that you want. I was knitting the size 2, and this pattern costs $9 US. Now, in terms of the total project cost, oh god, this whole video, like this is a doozy, which I don't know how I suddenly became a person who says this is a doozy, but here we are. So this whole video, so many, you know what, fall knitting plans need to be spend no money. That needs to be the fall knitting plan, because this project, okay, the whole concept of this came about because Sarah Lily Makes made this years ago, and it has lived rent-free in my head ever since. And unfortunately for me, it was made out of a couple of colorways from Hedgehog Fibers, which is a gorgeous, gorgeous yarn dyeing studio in Ireland, I believe. Fabulous colorways. Expensive, because an incredible amount of work goes into creating such fabulous colorways. And let's run through the damage that resulted from this. So I ordered these from Wool & Co. So the yarn cost me $73 US, or about $105 Canadian. And then this one got hit with duties. So that was an extra $35.81. Thank you so much. I think that one did not come via Canada Post, as that is not an amount that would make sense as just the tax on $100 of yarn. So I think that is one where there were some nasty brokerage fees in there. So that brings our total to $140.81 Canadian. And then, oh, my notes here are, I must have not pulled this from the latest video, because on the latest video, I updated you that this actually cost way more than that because I had to buy new yarn. What was my actual? Yes, here we go. So my total project cost, because I ended up having to buy an unexpected new yarn. So I ended up buying the La Bien-Aimée Twist Nouveau in the color Hightower when I ran out of my other two, because I didn't realize I was looking at the yardage of a short sleeve version of the pattern instead of the long sleeve. So I needed more yarn than I thought. So that brought the total to $148 US, or $206 Canadian. So for those keeping the score at home, yes, my project cost did double from what I thought it was going to be. So that was nice. I started this out being like, you know what, $100 is not terrible for like a long sleeve. Like, it's a very lightweight, but it's like basically a sweater out of hand-dyed yarn. That's not bad. And then it became bad. But so anyway, this pattern is a top down in the round raglan style construction, which I thought would be really nice for doing this kind of fade that would allow me to just like do my micro striping in a fairly simple way, so that I could blend these 2 and then 3 colorways together. And now by the time I'm recording this at the end of May, I've actually had this finished for quite a while. When did I finish this? So it turns out I actually finished this like a month ago. I finished this April 30th after casting it on March 21st. So it came together quite quickly, despite the fact that it was knit at a fingering weight, and I was kind of leery of knitting a fingering weight long sleeve for a long time, but I was really motivated in this case, both by this fade from Sarah Lily Makes that I was really coveting, and also just feeling like It kind of felt like a hole in my wardrobe in a similar way to the cardigans I've been talking about, where like, where is my like medium weather long sleeve knit? Like, I don't want arms out. I don't want to be wearing a knit tank top. I need my arms covered, but it's not cold. I don't want to be like sweating at room temperature. So I felt like this would be really perfect for that. This one came together faster than I feared that it might, and truthfully faster than it felt like it was, because I will not revisit all of my many complaints. And to be clear, not complaints with the pattern. The pattern was totally fine. The pattern was great. It was just weird, silly things that I was encountering because of this whole fade thing I was trying to do, whatever. And I spent enough time whining about that in my last couple of project updates. So today we're just gonna celebrate the fact that it's done and it's beautiful. Look at it. So let me get up so you can see it properly. Ta-da! Look at it. Isn't it beautiful? I don't want to clip my mic to it because it's so lightweight that I feel like it's going to do weird floppy things. So hopefully I'm holding this at an appropriate distance. So sorry if I'm not. I feel like it is the comfy, cozy, lightweight garment of my dreams. And I can tell you that vision was a success, because I should probably turn on the light in here. I feel like it's dark. So I can tell you, because I finished this a whole month ago at this point, that vision really was a success, because I have worn this so much. It's so cozy. I really like the amount of ease that I ended up with. It just feels effortless. Like, it's just it feels very similar to throwing on like a sweatshirt. It's just very cozy, very comfortable. It's not one that makes me overheat when my office reaches its like peak temperature from sunlight during the day, you know. I'll also show you, I think, was this a modification? I think I modified it to have a split hem. I think that's true. I think that's not in the pattern. And I just decided to do that. And I made the back hem a little bit longer than the front hem. I'm really happy with that decision. I feel like it just makes it a little bit more, just a bit more like casual. It makes it work a little bit better, I think, in like an untucked context. And I don't know, I'm happy with this. I do feel like I was saying in my last video, it definitely turned out a little bit different than my original vision, in large part because I did not envision the colorway Hightower to be a part of it. So there's definitely a darker element toward the bottom that is not what I had originally planned. But I do feel like for something where I had to improvise to such a degree at such a late stage in the project, I feel like this is kind of best case scenario as far as how that could have turned out. I will say, when I started the sleeves, I felt like, oh, I actually maybe should have started the ribbing like a while ago. I've probably knit these too long, but that's fine. I will just make sure to knit like extra decreases into the cuff to make sure it's really nice and cinched. And then if there's some extra length, that's fine. It will just kind of like bunch up at the wrist a little. And somehow, why do sleeves always get shorter? Why is that a thing? Like, I feel like here it looks fine. I just feel like when I'm like reaching for things, I'm often like surprised how short the sleeve is. And then also, it's really not like tight on my wrist at all. Like, there's quite a lot of like openness. I'm like, I did so many extra decreases. How are we still here? Like, I guess that's just the degree to which ribbing opens when it blocks. I just feel like I could have decreased that a lot further than I did even still. The way in which I have not yet been able to test this out, though, is actually the kind of original context for which I envisioned it, which I'm really excited about, because I kind of conceived of this as like the perfect garment for when I have like spent a day at my family's cottage and, you know, it's been nice and sunny. And then toward kind of the late afternoon, the sun starts to go down, you start cooling off. You're maybe still in your bathing suit that's like 95% dry, but now that there's a bit of a chill in the air, you're starting to feel a bit of that discomfort. And you're like, it's time. It's time to go change into my cozies for the evening. I feel like this is the perfect cottage cozy, because in that context, I'm sometimes tempted to change into my like thick woolly sweaters. And that feels really good for a few minutes. And then I regret my life choices, because it is, in fact, still July when I do that, despite the fact that I feel chilled for a moment, and soon the July catches up with me. So I kind of figured that this would be sort of the perfect garment for that context, because it will still give me that real wool coziness, but at a light enough weight that I hopefully won't 30 minutes later be like, time to go change again. So I think that it'll be really perfect for that. But I will have to update on that for sure later, because we have not yet had a chance to test this out, since it is indeed only May. But I have high hopes for that. I also have high hopes for Lauren's completed fade, because I have seen some pictures, but I have not yet seen her footage for this. So I'm really excited to check that out. And we're going to have cute little matching fades. Isn't that adorable? It's so adorable. Actually, maybe I should like pull up a chair so I don't have anywhere that I can sit where like you can see the whole thing. but I'm not like so far away. How about here? What if I sit here? That's kind of an awkward spot. We're gonna sit here for a minute while I finish telling you about this. Improv. But my head's so low. There's really no winning this, eh? If I get a little bit closer. Now you can't see the bottom. Framing. Anyway, so last time we talked, I was so close to being done, but I needed to finish binding off the sleeves. And I also was feeling like there's some real scraggly things going on under these arms. I really need to stitch that up with a mattress stitch just to hide it. And I did that. That's the update. It was terrible and boring. It took longer than I felt like it should have, but it did solve the issue. I now have nice clean lines underneath. It kind of just created the illusion of like a seam running up the underside rather than the complete not illusion, complete reality of the disaster that was me trying to manage microstriping in the round with increases and decreases where different strands were coming and going all the time. I learned that while I love knitting stripes, I do not love knitting single row stripes. So that's good information to have in my arsenal. I would also like to take a moment to appreciate the pocket at this range. Just again, I feel like now we're just a little bit closer and I feel like it just needs more attention. Look how cute it is. Look how hard I tried to make sure I was knitting like to match the fade at the point where it was going to be attached. I feel like I did a really good job of that. Thank you so much. I now am feeling a little bit silly sitting in this random spot in this room, still holding this mic in my hand. So one sec. All right, and we're back. So one last, I guess, closing thought on this project. I was going to pull some information from some previous recording notes for like a past episode where I was updating you with this and came across this must have been in my spring knitting plans because I came across the note of like why I wanted to knit this was that I thought it would be like a really nice vacation to Stockinette Island after all the cables I've been knitting, which just, if you watched my last couple of project updates pertaining to this top, you will know that it was not a vacation. If it was a vacation, it was that kind of vacation where like everything goes wrong and you come back and all your stories are about like all the things that went wrong on your trip. Like it was kind of that. So it's really laughable now to look back at that. What a nice vacation this will be to Stockinette Island. Get me off of this particular iteration of Stockinette Island because I was not having a great time there. But I will say, I know that for some people, the experience of knitting something really ends up trickling into like how much they wear it. Like if you had kind of a bad experience with knitting it, it might result in some hesitancy to wear it. It just kind of has like bad vibes baked in. And I am happy to say at least that I really don't feel like that's been the case with this one so far. Like I have been wearing this quite a lot. It's quite cozy. I actually, like when I first sat down to chat about this, I kind of forgot that all of my past updates have been complaining because I just wanted to sit here and be like, look at it, it's so pretty, I love it, it's so cozy. So that's a really good sign. This definitely turned out to be more of a product knit than a process knit, which I thought it was going to be really a good blend of both because I was still excited, like I said, to have finally a more lightweight long sleeve knit in my wardrobe, but it really ended up being more just about that, not so much the process being fun, but we got it done. And then I cast on my serendipity, which was, you will see when I put up my whole experience knitting my first colorwork sweater video, but that was so much fun that I was like, what was I doing knitting that last thing? That was terrible. This is the best. What? So very glad to have this now, but this is kind of factoring into part of my hesitancy about knitting the Allgood Tee right now. And granted, in that case, I won't be contending with the microstriping, which was the source of like 90% of my issues with this, but I just don't know if I want to be knitting back at that gauge in stockinette right now. We'll see how many other kind of more elaborate things I end up knitting before I feel like I'm ready for hopefully a more successful return to Stockinette Island. But I would like to also say a huge thank you to Lauren for doing this with me. It's been so much fun knitting this alongside her, and like we've each kind of been having our own distinct challenges with it, in part because we've actually been knitting different patterns, right? So we're kind of contending with different issues coming up and trying to apply our fades to it, but it's just been fun to be like, I got to this part, here's how mine looks, It's just been fun. And we've also gotten to hear from quite a few people who are like, it's really helpful to see the two of you knitting this and the comparison in between like knitting these different sizes and what that experience is like. So I so appreciate Lauren doing this with me so that we can share both of those perspectives. And I'm just so excited to see her shirt. So let's go check out Lauren's.
Hi everyone, I'm so excited to be coming to you with my finished down by the foam fade, if you will. I think you can just tell by how it's sitting that it fits crazy good, and I'm so excited about it. Let's rehash some of the details. This is the Movement Tee by Lily Kate France. The pattern itself can accommodate up to a bust size of 62 inches plus 2 for the ease. You really want that 2 inches of ease. I knit a size 6, which is the like 48 to 50 based on my upper bust size, which she is very emphatic to do in the pattern. So based on an upper bust size of 46 inches and a full bust of 54 inches. And she is amazing. She has some darts built into the pattern, which you can see. My little kind of messy, but here are the darts and they just look so amazing. So the pattern cost us £7.50. I paid about $10 at the time, which is about $13 Canadian at the time. I'm gonna be honest, things have changed a lot lately, and so some of these conversions might be a little off, but we're doing our best. I knit it in Hedgehog Fibers, Merino DK, in Down by the River and foam. And I did a technique where I held just down by the river, and then I held 2 down by the river and 1 foam, and then I had 2 down by the river and 2 foam to help get us through the short rows for the bust shaping. And then I went to 2 foam and 1 down by the river, and then to full foam. I ordered this yarn from Wool & Company, an online store, but also I think they have a physical store outside of the Chicago area. And because of sales and different things, it was about $180 total US. And in Canadian right now, that's about $250. It was knit on a US size 5 or 3.75 millimeter needle, which will come up in a second. And so my total cost, including the pattern and the yarn, was about $190. Now I did use 6 skeins of yarn, but I didn't use all of the 6 skeins of yarn. This is how much foam I had left, and I have about the same amount left on the Down by the River. So my cast on date was March 6th, 2025. And my finish date, when it was all blocked and ready to go, was May 21st, 2025. It both feels like, oh, that was a lot of time. And it also feels like, oh, that wasn't very much time at all. I'm not traditionally a garment knitter. This is maybe my 3rd garment that I've fully finished. And now already this year I finished this and 1 other one. Allie has absolutely inspired me to go down the garment rabbit hole with how adventurous she is as a knitter. And I can't stop. It's so fun. I've got plans for like 7 other things coming down the line, and maybe you'll get a little glimpse of some of those in the future. So let's just do a full. Okay, you'll notice that it's like a little bit of a crop. I really like these details down the side. Oh, one thing I didn't mention, and you can kind of tell here because of how I just kind of did it a little ad hoc, is that I did add in waist shaping. That is just because my waist is smaller than my belly and my hips. And one of my main frustrations from commercially made clothes is that they don't account for kind of the hourglass proportions that I have, if you will. And so I added like 6 rows of increases over however many. You know, I think I just cribbed it off of another pattern. You just find what works for you and your body, and I just added those increases in, and I really like how that came out. Some other things to point out. Again, I pointed out the darts. I really love how well the raglan shaping works with my body. I did these really adorable little contrast folded over hems so that it's foam on the inside and Down by the River on the outside, and just in general I'm really happy with it. So the proportion is a crop, and I did, when I was adding on to this design, I added like a bunch more length, and I'm so glad that I did because I totally blocked this in the washer and dryer. It's super wash, and I really wanted to see what that would do, see how it broke down the polymers of this fabric. I haven't spent a lot of time experimenting different things, and I had done a swatch with foam. Here's the swatch I did with foam, where I had put it through the washer and dryer, and I made a little note of what needles I used, what my settings were, and what the pre and post width and height gauge was for 4 inches. Now these are bigger needles than I used for this shirt, but the idea is to understand what the percentage increase is. And on this little swatch, I mean, it was bang on. Like the pre size was 23 across and 32 high, and the post size was 23 across and 31 high. And I was like, okay, so I'll do this to the length and it just won't change that much. What I didn't think of in this process is that changing it by 1 row on a swatch this size, not a big deal. Changing it by 1 row on a shirt this size, a little bit of a bigger deal. It ended up shrinking vertically, but not widthwise. But honestly, I think it came out to a better proportion than it would have. So I'm gonna show again. It's a little awkward just with my camera set up, but it comes to the top of my pants here, just below my natural waist. This is my natural waist, and this is where it lands. And I had it down further, and I think it would have cut my belly in a really awkward way if I had kept it to that point. So all's well that ends well. Fabric feels amazing. The only thing I'll say about this fabric is that it's warm even for a Seattle summer. It's DK merino weight wool, even though it's super wash. And so we're not going into a season where it will get a lot of use from me, especially during the day. As you can tell, it's already gotten a little sunny, get my freckles in, wear sunscreen. But the thing about Seattle is it's gonna be so good in the fall and the early spring on those 45-degree days where I have to take the dog out and it's like sunny, so I'm like warm. I hate wearing coats, but I still want to be kind of warm in my core, and I'm so excited for this usage. I'll have Allie throw up some photos of me styling this shirt, and so you can see it on my full body rather than this somewhat awkward camera situation in my extremely messy room. One thing too, in the last episode that I made about this, I had mentioned either I was really bad at counting or there was something not quite right about the darts in the bust area because it felt like it was a little off center, and I ended up eating into the armpit a little bit to get those short rows. And amazingly, Lily Kate France reached out through Allie to be like, hey, I looked through this pattern and actually I did notice that in the directions for the bust darts in the size 6, there was a little bit of a typo and I fixed that, but also doesn't quite account for what you're doing. How amazing that she's so responsive. It was totally a surprise. We didn't reach out to her, and I in no way wanted to implicate anything about her pattern that would be negative because I really love it. And it was just such a nice and polite email. She was totally right. There was something that was like kind of a typo, and also I'm just bad at math. I think that ultimately is what it comes down to. I get very impatient with short rows. I do not like them very much. And so I'm just like, whatever, I'll just do it. And so that was in no way to present any issue with the pattern. She just had not had a chance for somebody to knit the size 6 with the bust darts in this specific way. And so I think it was a combination of things, but she's so lovely. And I'm so happy I have like several more of her patterns on my list. And I think she's really popular for a reason because, oh my God, look at the fit on this. I literally could not buy a better t-shirt raglan situation. Like, I started out this thing being like, I want to knit this so that I have clothes that just really make me feel strong and powerful in my body, that are made for me, that I get to make choices about and decisions about. And oh my God, here she is. I literally could not ask for a better, more comfortable fit. And the fade is just the cutest, and I'm just so happy with it. It's really encouraged me to kind of think about my wardrobe in a new way. What can I pair with this? What's gonna be what I like? I don't have a lot of crop tops, you know, that's not something that is normalized or easily accessible for fat people, although there's so many babes and theys that are out there living the dream, doing the best. But understanding that this proportion could just like be something I really enjoy is incredible to me. So I'm so happy with how it's turned out. Hey Saga. I already have plans for another one of these. I'm a maniac, but like the fade was so fun, and also I kept finding these other Hedgehog Fibers colors, and nobody will be surprised at the colorways that I've picked out for this. I love this wisteria. Oh, big surprise. This one is Love Letter. Okay, wisteria, Love Letter, and Sea Glass. Like, how cool is that gonna be? I'm really, really excited for definitely another one of these raglan tees, a movement tees from Lily Kate France. Honestly, so lovely and wonderful to work on. Got me through just a really tough couple of months of working harder than I've ever worked in my life, just trying to to make it happen in this economy. I really want to thank Allie for bringing me along on this ride, because I would not have done this without her sharing her ideas with me, you know, encouraging me along the way, walking me through this process, putting stuff up on her channel, and her amazing editing skills, which will undoubtedly make me look so much more articulate than I actually am. Watch this space. I don't think this is our last collab ever. I just really appreciate all of the nice comments everybody has had, the tips, the help. It's just a really cool space, and I'm so lucky to have been invited to be a part of it. Thank you so much. Happy Pride. I'm excited to see what else happens in the future and what else we make together. Cheers. Were you gonna have words with me if I left you out? Are you a knitting queen? Or are you mostly annoyed that I don't pay attention to you all of the time when I'm knitting? Because I think it's the latter.
Okay, Editing Alley here. So I just wanted to pop in and do a bit of a recap of our comparative project stats between the two of us, because some of these numbers stood out to me when I was editing Lauren's footage, which I hadn't seen when I was recording mine. And I just feel like it's worth putting these directly side by side for a second. So in terms of our cast on dates, Lauren started this before I did. So she started hers on March 6th and I cast mine on March 20th. So she had a solid 2-week lead over me on this. But in terms of cast off, I had finished this by April 30th and hers took until May 21st, which granted, as we've heard, she did have some frogging involved. So that definitely slowed things down a little bit, but does that account for 5 weeks worth of slowdown? Probably not. I think that's probably more reflective of the different numbers of stitches that we each needed to be knitting to complete our projects. So in terms of sizing, I was knitting a garment designed to have a 36-inch bust, and Lauren's was designed to have, I believe, a 52-inch finished width, because her size was to accommodate between a 48 to a 50-inch upper bust, and I believe there were supposed to be 2 inches of positive ease, and she was also adding bust starts to hers to go up to a 54-inch bust. So in terms of yardage, interestingly, we used very similar yardage, and if anything, I used slightly more. So I'm just counting the amount of yardage that we had to purchase to complete this project, like I'm counting full skeins because we didn't measure our scraps left over. But so my yardage purchased was 1,400 yards of a fingering weight version, and hers was 1,300 yards, so slightly less of DK weight. Now, while the yardage is almost the same because one is fingering and one is DK, that's going to be very different in terms of weight, because to get that, I only had to purchase 3 skeins of fingering weight. She had to purchase 6 skeins of DK. That means that I purchased 300 grams of yarn and she purchased 600. So we really started to see a difference there, and where we also see that difference come out really strongly is in the cost of this project for each of us respectively. So to price this out, I am going off the prices on the Hedgehog Fibers website that are listed in euros, because there's a lot of variability in terms of like, well, I was buying it in Canada, and so like I had to pay duties, and I think my shipping costs were also probably different than they were to the States. So putting all that aside, because that doesn't really allow us to compare apples to apples, so if we just look at the prices on the Hedgehog Fibers website for the yarns that we were each respectively buying, 3 skeins of the Oh So Fine Merino, which I was using, cost 99 euros, and the 6 skeins of the Merino DK that Lauren was using is 173 euros. So we have a 74 euro difference, almost double what my project cost. And I would like to drill home, in case you've forgotten in the last 2 minutes of not seeing Lauren's fade, Lauren's fade is a short sleeve. So first we're in fact a long sleeve like mine. I think it's safe to say that price would be solidly double, and lest anyone be thinking, well, that's just because she chose to knit hers out of DK that hers is so much more expensive. Let us not forget that if she were knitting this at a fingering weight, her gauge would be very different and would require a lot more yardage of the fingering weight than of the DK weight. I don't know exactly how that would shake out in terms of how much closer or further I might put her numbers relative to mine, but like, I think there's just an undeniable added cost to knitting for people who are knitting at larger sizes. And I think that is true kind of regardless of how you look at it, whether that's a financial cost or an opportunity cost. Because I could say, well, if I were knitting at a larger size than I currently am, I would probably still be doing the same amount of knitting in terms of like time that I'm spending on it. And therefore, well, I probably wouldn't spend more money. I would just be spending more time and be knitting fewer total garments. Like they would just take longer to finish them. So that could be true, right? It could be true that I'm not actually spending any more money. But then there's that opportunity cost that I brought up in the last episode where we talked about this project. Like, it's just a much bigger commitment to decide what you want to knit. And like, I already feel so like when I'm trying to plan my projects, there's a little bit of angst of like, I can only knit so many things, and not even just like this summer or this year, but like in this life. Like it gets existential real fast in a similar way to when I think about like the books that I will and won't read in my life. Like that, okay, we don't really need to get into mortality right now, but I just feel like it is a worthwhile exercise in empathy to see what it is like for other people doing things that are in some way similar to you, but coming from different life circumstances. And it's not that there's really anything like actionable here. Like, I'm not saying, oh, you like shouldn't knit things if you're knitting at a smaller size, or if you're knitting at a larger size, you need to spend more hours knitting to like keep it. Like, I'm there's nothing here that I'm like, this is an imperative now that we do with this information, but it's more just like, I just think this is a useful thing for people to have in mind, because I think that regardless of our best intentions in terms of, oh, don't compare yourself to other people and whatever, I think that the realities of the internet make it impossible to not do some amount of that, at the very least subconsciously. So I think just having a better understanding of how your exact circumstances are very particular to you and the experience of someone else, whether they're knitting at a size that's larger than yours or smaller than yours, or knitting with more personal responsibilities in their life that take up more of their time or less of their time, right? Like, I've said this before, but I don't have children, and every single time that I visit my sister and her whole household, I'm like, oh my God, I would not be able to do even half of the things that I do if I were also being a parent. So to all of the not just knitters but knitting podcasters who are parents, I have no idea how you're doing this. So yeah, I just feel like this is a really useful case study in seeing how such a similar project can shake out so differently in terms of materials, cost, timeline, like every single factor between two people who are fundamentally trying to do basically the same thing. So I hope this has also been useful to you.
All right, that's all I've got for you on the knitting front today. Now, it's kind of, it's too late to do a reel off the needles here. I've been talking for absolutely ever, but I would like to do a quick small business shout out for the little Etsy shop that I got my shoes from that I was wearing in this video, because feet will not be free on YouTube. But their stuff is so good. It's so well made. It's all made to order, so it's very not wasteful. Their customer service is so good. Like, they were so helpful to me, and if you need like nice shoes for something coming up, these are just kind of my, if I don't want to wear sneakers, if I want to wear something a little bit more elevated than that, but it's too hot for me to want to wear my boots, then these are my go-to. So I will leave a link to these in the description below because I highly recommend. And that's it for my summer knitting plan. So I would love to know what your summer knitting plans are, or if you're in the opposite hemisphere from me, what your summer knitting plans were. What did you make this summer? I'm also curious, just like, are you a summery garment knitter, or are you just knitting pullovers 24/7, 365? Let me know. I'm always kind of torn between these two things, so I'm curious what your take on it is. And if you'd like to be here next time, I hope you'll consider subscribing if you haven't already. If you already have, though, you're my favorite. And I'll see you next time.